Hello.
Hi, Owen.
Nice. Hi, Anthony. How are you? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Anthony Anaxagorou. I'm a poet, a writer, an educator, a publisher, and just released a book called How to Write It on Merky Books that looks at the publishing industry, the politics of writing, poetry, literature, and it's interspersed with anecdotes from my early life up until now.
Brilliant. So, Anthony, a lot of people know you. A lot of people know you as a spoken word artist, or maybe got to know you as a spoken word artist. And a lot of people know you as a very acclaimed, published poet. Do you think that those two things are different?
Yeah, I think that spoken word, the mode of spoken word is obviously its own unique form. Publishing culture and writing around the page is its own thing, and so yeah, I think they are. But I also think we should acknowledge the trajectory of people and how people grow, how they want to experiment, and how they want to work in different forms as they mature, and their kind of their grasp of language and poetry develops more, that they might want to take things into different spaces, which is actually what happened with me. I felt that I'd outgrown the format of spoken word, and I just wanted to try and do different things on a page. And because the page is essentially endless on what you can do there, I realized that it became more interesting than spoken word, which was very much predicated on a formula a lot of the time, and winning over the audience in the way that slam is. It's just very audience centric, and so I wanted to try and have something that moved out of that. And I felt that the page poetry, traditionalism, formalism, whatever you want to call it, there was just more going on there than what I found in spoken word.
Nice. I know that earlier on when we were chatting, you talked a lot about sort of how criticism works. And I know for a fact that you're a person who enjoys criticism. You feel it fuels the work that you make.
Yeah.
And I know we've both spoken about this before, about spoken word isn't really something that has that level of criticism. Do you want to?
Yeah. I always felt it was the one essential component that was missing from the spoken word ethos, was the fact that you had people that were attracted to the form because they were coming from disenfranchised places. They were coming from places where they'd been disparaged, they'd been berated. And so the last thing they wanted to hear was, your poem isn't very good, which was kind of the case for me and a lot of my peers. We all shared a similar kind of desire to just to be accepted, because we were rejected in every other aspect of society. And so I felt that because of that, the culture itself didn't really have an element where we could develop our poems. There was never a space where you turned up and it was like, right, let's show you why this poem isn't very good, or how this can be improved, or how this can be taken away. Because again, I was writing in isolation. I wasn't really sending poems to other poets. I wasn't really attending many workshops, or the workshops that I was attending, they were page centric. They were focused on page poetry and how stuff can work on a white space. So I felt that that was a huge part of what was missing. And then when I actually did start getting mentoring, and I did want to pursue a career in publishing, that's when I realized that it was really beneficial working with another poet who will line edit you, but also push you into thinking about the poem in a different way and challenging your ideas and your decisions that you make on the page.
Nice. And then I suppose from that there's a certain aspect of your practice where you're fairly diverse in your output. I know you also do lots of workshops, and you work in schools and in education. So all of these different elements together, that's kind of helped you to build a career. Would you say that that's a fair statement?
Oh, 100%. It's one of the fairest things you said. I think it's about having multiple revenue streams, and people forget that not many writers sit around and just write all day. Most people work in education, they're workshop facilitators, creative practitioners, whatever you might deem it. That's what they're doing. Writing is obviously one element of it, but then there's the people, the being connected to a scene, to a movement, to a city, to a town, to a region. That's the kind of for me anyway, like I get a lot of stimulation and a lot of ideas generate when I am among other people. And I don't feel that I'm just living in isolation in my head, which over the lockdown is kind of what's happened. I miss the stimulus that I get from the outside world. So I think, yeah, having multiple revenue streams is really important, particularly if you're looking to make a career out of poetry and sustain yourself through writing. I mean, it's not to say that everyone is built to teach. I don't think that's the case. I think that, you know, if you can't teach, does that mean that you can't be a writer? Absolutely not. But you just have to be kind of, I guess, more divergent in the way that you think about jobs and how you bring in money. Like I know poets who, they work as copywriters, some work in advertising, some work as civil servants, as lawyers, barristers. There's different things that you do. I happen to like teaching. I like theory. I like talking about, you know, language in the abstract. And so it made sense that I would go into teaching. And I'm interested in process as well. You know, like I think everyone is, that the process of how work emerges, how it materializes, and then how it's perceived.
Nice. And this is stuff that you're talking about in this new book. Is that right?
Yeah. All these subjects are touched upon. I mean, it's a small book, so I can't go into like massive detail, but I try and do enough in various places that enable people to think about the things that are available to them, the opportunities. And I use myself as a kind of case study rather than like mullering other people's poems. I just say, look, I wrote some bad poems because this is the circumstances that I was coming from. I didn't have access to these opportunities. And a lot of it is about opportunity. It's not about having an innate disposition to be able to do something in a kind of, you know, in a particular way. It's about being taught and educated and encouraged to think about art in a particular way that then lends itself. In a way that we do with spoken word. Like your first spoken word gig you go to, you become completely enamored by the performance and compelled by the poem that you think, I want to do that. And so you start thinking about how it was achieved and you try and mimic or create a version of that, of yourself. And it's the same thing with, you know, with page poems. You read a poem that bangs on the page and it's like, wow, how did they do that? I want to have a go at doing my version of that.
Just picking up on something you said there, you said you've written some bad poems. What's the worst poem you've ever written? And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the worst poems went on for about 15 pages. It was essentially like 7 poems in one. They go off on so many different tangents. And just the tropes. I think because I listened to a lot of folk music, I listened to a lot of rap music as a kid. There's tropes in those things, there's cliches, there's familiar language. And so I never really saw that as a problem. You know, have a poem with a couple, you know, cliches in there is fine. Like it's, people know what I'm talking about. And I think developing the capacity to take more risk in my work, in my construction of syntax, of wording, positioning of words, like to be strange and unusual and tricky is fine. It doesn't mean you're being elitist. It doesn't mean you're pandering to the middle classes and the bourgeoisie and whatnot. It basically means that working class people, in fact, all people, have a capacity to engage with art in a way that is unique to them. And it's believing in that and trusting the reader that they're going to get something from it, whatever it might be. Even if it's like, oh, that's a nice image, that's enough. Or it might change their entire way of thinking about a particular subject. That's also enough. So it's like not wanting to be as dogmatic with how I wanted the work to be internalized and received, and just allowing people to make of it what they will.
Nice. The car horn there agrees with you. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's my guy down there. What's going on?
Great news. In a minute, you're going to set us a little writing task.
Yeah.
But before that, I know you've got a live gig coming up. Is that right?
Yeah, not
in the flesh live gig.
Yeah, the Nottingham Poetry Festival in November. Yeah, it'll be my first live gig, I think, since March at Stanza at St Andrews. That was the last time I actually sat on the stage or stood on the stage with people. Yeah, that's coming up next month.
Brilliant. And do you want to set us a little writing task?
Well, there's two that they can pick from. The first one is to try and write a poem about your hands without using the word hands. So the word hands cannot be used anywhere, not in the title, not in the body of the poem. The other one is to go into a book, the closest book next to you. I'm going to take Will Alexander, who is a language poet, so he's very difficult, but it's fine. And open the book, and the first line that you read, lightning and blood, poetic cornerstone enigmas. That's what you start with. Not with that line, but you take a line that you see, you write that down, and you use that as a jump off. And then when you get to the end of the poem, you delete that line if you don't want to get done for plagiarism, and then you have your poem.
Awesome. Anthony, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Owen. Thank you for the time.